Every country is drowning in debt. America owes $38 trillion, Europe $14 trillion, Japan $9 trillion. Oil giants and export powerhouses alike are buried to their necks in debt. But here's the paradox that should terrify you. Everyone owes, so who the hell is owed? The answer is more disturbing than you think. The world owes itself. But that doesn't mean everyone's winning equally. In 1694, England was fighting France and ran out of gold. The king begged merchants for help, pledging future taxes as collateral, borrowing money in exchange for interest. The Bank of England was born from this desperation. Revolutionary, the state could now spend money it hadn't earned yet. In return, lenders got something priceless, a government promise. A piece of paper that could be traded, bought, sold. That's how the government bond was born. The seed of our entire financial system. Fast forward 3 centuries and debt has become the world's biggest export. The planet's total debt is $315 trillion, 3 times the global economy. Growing by $1 trillion every 100 days. Here's where it gets twisted. Of America's $38 trillion debt, about half is publicly traded. 2/3 of that is held by Americans themselves, in banks, pension funds, the Federal Reserve. Only 1/3, roughly $9 trillion, sits in foreign hands. Japan holds $1 trillion, China $800 billion. So America's debt to China? A mere 2%. America's real debt? To itself. The Treasury issues bonds. Bankers buy them. The Federal Reserve buys them back, printing new dollars. Americans pay taxes to cover interest, which flows right back into American retirement accounts. A hall of mirrors. The debt is real, but the creditor is just the system's own reflection. And this isn't just America. It's everywhere. Japan lends to America. America lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations via the World Bank. Developing nations lend back by parking currency reserves in Western bonds. A planetary game of hot potato. Except the potato is made of promises. Everyone's holding someone else's IOU. Every promise secured by another promise. Like a poker table where every player borrowed chips from the next. The only rule keeping the game alive: nobody stands up. But the most powerful layer is different: the markets themselves. Behind every government bond lurks a web of funds, hedge funds, central banks, managing trillions. They're the true masters of credit. They decide which countries borrow cheap and which pay through the nose. When confidence breaks, currencies collapse, governments fall, entire economies restructure overnight. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives. Central banks don't manage debt, they manufacture it. When the Federal Reserve or European Central Bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. There is no debt-free money. Every dollar, every euro, every coin represents someone's debt somewhere. This system has survived for decades on confidence alone. As long as investors believe governments will pay interest, forget principal, the machine keeps spinning. But when confidence cracks, we've seen it. In Greece in 2010, debt became unpayable. Bondholders panicked. Yields exploded. The ECB and IMF intervened. But rescue came with a price: savage tax hikes, spending cuts, mass unemployment. For an entire generation, bailout became synonymous with sacrifice. In Argentina, repeated defaults turned debt into a national curse. In Sri Lanka, when the government ran out of foreign currency to service loans, fuel shortages and political collapse followed. When the system breaks, creditors suddenly become visible. The IMF, the rating agencies, anonymous bondholders, strangling entire nations. But even after collapse, the same logic restarts. New loans replace old ones. Old debts get restructured. The machine resets with just a new name on the same balance sheet. Because in the 21st century, debt isn't designed to be repaid, it's designed to be rolled over. This isn't conspiracy theory. It's policy. When you or I take a loan, we're expected to pay back the principal. But governments operate differently. They pay old bonds with new ones. Economists call it refinancing. The real product is interest. Rent charged for stability. The global economy now runs on that rent. Like a shark that must keep swimming to breathe. America will never pay off its $38 trillion. It'll refinance it forever. Japan's been rolling over its debt for decades, now exceeding 250% of GDP. Yet its government bond yields remain near zero. Investors aren't waiting to be repaid. They're waiting to renew the deal. Why? Because for them, government debt is the safest collateral in existence. A U.S. Treasury bond isn't a liability, it's an asset. The foundation of global markets. Pension funds hold it. Banks use it as collateral. Central banks treat it as money. The system depends on governments never paying off their debt. Because if they did, the world would lose its most trusted financial instrument. Imagine, Washington suddenly decides to pay off every last dollar. Banks and funds worldwide suddenly lose their most stable asset. The dollar supply would shrink dramatically, triggering deflation and collapse. Paying off the debt would destroy what makes the economy function. So governments do the opposite. They keep issuing more, not recklessly, but rhythmically. Debt becomes capitalism's heartbeat itself, pulsing through every pension, every mortgage, every market on earth. That's why when politicians talk about balancing the budget or paying down national debt, they're selling an illusion. The goal isn't to eliminate debt. It's to keep it sustainable, serviceable, and desirable enough that the system never stops believing in it. When belief fades, numbers lose meaning. Confidence collapses, interest rates spike, and an economy built entirely on rolling promises grinds to a halt. That's the real secret of sovereign debt. The plan was never to pay it back. The plan is to keep the world believing it will. It's a closed loop of trust. As long as that trust holds, the numbers can stretch infinitely. But trust isn't distributed equally. When we say, we owe it to ourselves, that's only half true. Interest payments don't flow equally through society. They flow upward, from taxpayers and workers to the institutions and investors holding the debt. In other words, debt isn't just a transfer between countries, it's a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality and global indebtedness rise together. The system rewards those who own debt and punishes those who merely pay it. Sound familiar? Because it's the same story scaled up, from households to nations, from nations to the planet. Creditors aren't villains. Debtors aren't victims. They're two sides of the same engine. The problem is what happens when the engine runs out of fuel. When new borrowing can't keep pace with old promises. That's when "who's the creditor?" stops being abstract and becomes personal. Because at the top of this global pyramid, there's no single face to blame. Not China. Not Wall Street. Not the IMF. All of them, and us. The modern financial system has turned debt itself into money. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, and citizens depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor has blurred beyond recognition. Debt once meant bondage. Today it means balance. But if that balance ever tips, if confidence breaks, the illusion ends and we'll remember what debt really is. A promise that can't be kept forever.